This is something very important I think we need to discuss here, because while most people will read this title and say, hey, this sounds really cool. This is really dope. I can't wait to do something like this. You have to understand what company this is, and you have to understand the repercussions of what they're potentially going to do with this kind of implementation, this type of technology and mechanic. And the first thing that came to my mind, and Ferret and I have already talked about this morning, and the first thing that I responded to Tinwin with when he sent me this, before I even got into the news segment, was you have to understand that this is EA, and you have to understand that while, yes, having your own voice being utilized in a game as an RPG is quite an enhancement for immersion, it's also significantly risky depending on how the company is going to address this. And EA, as we all know, right, is a very scummy company. And my big first thought about how terribly bad this could be used by EA was them putting some kind of disclaimer in their games that implement this kind of technology, saying, if you agree to use this and record your voice for use in this technology, then you agree to let us own your voice in any way we see fit moving forward. Which means they can use your voice in any of their products moving forward, which also allows them to circumvent using voice actors. And you're also not going to get compensated, right? There's a lot of really bad areas and avenues in which this, and we all know how this works, right? They'll go, disclaimer, you're about to use this technology, and it'll be a big, long, flippin' readme where you have to agree to the terms and conditions, and it'll be all stated in a lot of terms that most people aren't going to understand because it's written by flipping a bunch of lawyers and stuff, and most people aren't going to read it. And they'll just go, yeah, I agree because I want to use this. And then it's over, right? I'm not saying this is definitively how this is going to be used, but there is absolutely the premise for being concerned about how it could be used in this fashion, right? I think that people have to understand that what's the long game? What's the end game here of why EA would want to be doing it? Look, let's not fool ourselves here. EA is not a company that's really concerned about bringing their community of gamers a lot of, increased functionality for just giving us cool things to use for no reason, right? So EA always has something that they're going to be getting out of what they're giving us. That is who they are. They're one of the scummiest corporations in the gaming industry. They're terrible. I can't flip and stand them. And it's because of this kind of crap that they've done for so long. But you've got to be hyper aware of, you see something like this coming into the fold for us technology-wise, and it coming especially from a company like this, you have to be aware of what might be their kind of end game. What are they trying to get out of it? And the first thing that came to mind was what I was just talking about. They want our voices. And they want our voices so that they don't have to pay other people for their voices. Probably. I'm not saying it's definitively and explicitly what they're doing here, but it is quite possible and quite probable. So let's read this. A new EA patent lets players apply their own voices to game characters. Players can provide sample speech, which is used to create character voices. EA has patented the ability to generate in-game voice acting using a player's own voice. As spotted by Very Alley very ally, very ally, very ally, very ally. Ali, I think it's Ali. Gaming, the patent, which is named Generating Speech in the Voice of a Player of a Video Game, was filed in 2020 but was published last month. The patent describes a process in which players input data that represents speech content, which is then passed through a synthesizer module, a voice converter, and a vocoder to generate new dialogue based on the sample. The idea is that players will be able to put their own voice in the game, with the most obvious example being the ability to make the protagonist sound like the player. The patent explains that previous attempts at generating speech in games often involved text-to-speech systems, where the game receives text and uses a synthesizer to generate audio speech. However, the patent says that, quote, such approaches usually require many speech samples, hours of speech samples, in order for the synthesizer to accurately capture the voice of the synthesized speech audio. And that if a different voice is needed, the synthesizer would need to be trained again with hours of new samples. The methods described in the patent, however, enable speech audio to be generated in the voice of a player of a video game using speech audio provided by the player and a voice converter. You can see here how this all kind of works through this small diagram here. The process sounds similar to the numerous examples of AI voice generator software currently found online. These can receive voice recordings of a person talking, then use AI to turn these into a text-to-speech tool, which can say anything in that person's voice in a manner that sounds convincing enough to fool some people. As ever, the filing of a patent is no guarantee that such technology will ever make it into a video game, but it could shed light into how future narrative-based EA games may evolve character customization. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that there's obviously, this is a very interesting patent, right? Very interesting patent. And the amount of possibilities that it could give players for immersion or just things to toy around with for the voice acting in the games and stuff is very intriguing. But there's a scary side to this too. I think people need to be very, very concerned with how this is being. If we're sure that they're implementing something like this and they're not recording our voices, uploading our recorded voices, everything staying local for us or whatever, cool. But if they're going to be taking our voices and using them at will, and let's be fair, even if they say they're not, how many times have we had companies doing this kind of thing where we didn't find out until years afterwards that they were doing scummy stuff like this, you know? And then what do? Pay out some kind of lawsuit. Pay out some kind of lawsuit that's like negligible, you know, really in the grand scheme of things compared to what they've been able to make off of what they got over those years from what they took, right? So it's a very scary kind of thing. I think that people, it's intriguing, it's neat, it could be very cool, but it's a very complicated issue here that I think has ethical concerns and impacts potentially on the industry as a whole that can't be overlooked. We've got to be very hyper aware of what's going on here.